This week, first up, it's the security news. How a Google researcher reported 3 flaws in the Apache web server. Medical data leaked on GitHub due to developer errors. Experts hacked 28,000 unsecured printers to raise awareness on printer security issues. Tesla is cracking down on performance-enhancing hacks for the Model 3. Former Uber CISO changed over alleged breach and cover-up. And researchers sounded alarm over malicious AWS community AMIs. In our second segment, 2 pre-recorded interviews from Security Weekly's Virtual Hacker Summer Camp. Faro Mavatuna, CEO of NetSparker, and Paul Batista, CEO of Polarity. In our final segment, we air one more pre-recorded interview with Roy Cohen, co-founder and VP of Sales at Vicarious, and Shani Dodge, C++ developer at Vicarious, discussing predicting vulnerabilities in compiled code. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Hackers attack systems that are not patched. You need protection, but virtual patching isn't working. That's why you go patchless. Topia analyzes, prioritizes, and remediates vulnerabilities before they're exploited. Even the 0 days, all from one interface. Security gets better memory defense to complement endpoint strategy while improving overall vulnerability management and compliance. Adopt a hacker's mindset, eliminate vulnerability. Get your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/vicarious. NetSparker, the developers of a comprehensive automated web security platform that includes web vulnerability scanning, assessment, and management. NetSparker's desktop and cloud-based security solutions employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities and provides a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/NetSparker. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who does not shun his own performance modifications, if you know what I mean, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 664, recorded on August 27th, 2020, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, the doctor is in the house, Dr. Doug White.
It is I, and I am here.
You are here to shun the non-believers?
I'm shunning the performance indicators.
Yes, shunning the performance indicators.
I'm going to shun your performance indicators. I've never had any problem with performance indicators.
On the lines remotely, Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome.
Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to be here again with everybody. I've been on the internet way too much today, like hours. It's crazy.
Hours.
Also on the internet, Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Buenos dias. I'm curious how those metrics are measured, Dr. White.
I prefer centimeters myself. Everything sounds better in centimeters.
Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Well, so many things to say. I'm glad to be back. I took a week off because I have a new granddaughter, and I'm very depressed because I had to leave her in Richmond and drive home.
Congrats,
I'm curious,
by the way.
though, Joff, when was the last day that you didn't spend hours on the internet, or any of us? When was the last time you didn't spend hours on the internet?
I should have qualified. I have actually been broadcasting, webcasting, podcasting, whatever you want to call it.
It's casting.
Way too much today on the network.
I suspected that was what you meant.
His OnlyFans account is blowing up.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have one more Twitter follower.
Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Hey, good to see everybody. Glad to be back here up in Idaho and almost ready for a great weekend. Starting to get some blue skies. The smoke's blowing out that blew in from California and Oregon.
Woohoo. Mr. Larry Pesce is here with us. Larry, welcome.
Yeah, after another week, back from Sans teaching and doing a little celebration tonight because we're getting close to the end of a chapter because I sold my mom's house today.
Yay, congrats. It's awesome.
Dude, that's awesome. Congrats.
Very nice. Announcement. Join our mailing list and all things Security Weekly. Basically, if you go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, you can join our mailing list. That list gets you announcements about all of our upcoming webcast virtual training. I am planning on putting some more content on the mailing list as well. You can also subscribe to your interests, so things you're interested in, tell us about it. And if you subscribe to the mailing list, we automatically send you an invite, a personal invite to Discord. However, also on securityweekly.com/subscribe, you can join our Discord server. And when we go live and do stuff, you'll see the notifications in there. And if you want to do that, that's cool too. We like having people there and chatting. And you can subscribe to all of our shows, all on the same page, securityweekly.com/subscribe. If you've got a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on the shows, you can submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete that form, and we review those on a regular basis. Now, on to the news stories for this week. I thought this week was a little slow in terms of news stories.
I'd say slow, but some things that make you think and some good discussion.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it was more about quality than quantity this week.
Yeah,
for sure. This first one I found, I thought was really cool. I believe it was Xavier Mertens. He found a malicious Excel sheet that I thought he had crafted, but it looks like he came across this somehow.
I hope he wiped it off.
Basically, yeah, right? Basically had a malicious macro. Looked like it was base 64 encoded and was like a 0 out of 87 on virus total.
Yep, 57.
57, thank you. I thought that was pretty cool.
Does it matter if it's a 0, what it's out of?
It's true. Nothing was catching it. Of course,
could be a 0 out of a -1.
Of course, now people that had it's not a secret anymore. Now, virus total is going to catch on.
Now
cat's out of the bag, right?
Now the cat's out of the bag. It's scoring 57 out of 57.
Right. Someone's tradecraft has been burned, or more than one person's tradecraft has been burned.
Yes.
I mean, the obfuscation, at the end of the day, macros are still going to be a thing. In fact, I think I have an article in there on Microsoft's big push to sandbox basically everything O365 for E5 tenants and above. And so, macros execution in general will just become a null point, supposedly. But if you're still using the hard apps or the desktop apps, then you can almost always obfuscate the macros, and you'd be surprised how many businesses actually utilize macros still for business functions. And so I don't think they're going away just yet. I think it's going to be an interesting shift from Office documents and macros for initial execution, or getting on a box, to something else, which was where we'll see WebSockets and browser hooks. But it's still a thing for a little while.
Yeah, I agree, Tyler. I look at technology like Authenticate, browser isolation, and they're just the one that comes to top of mind. There's lots of products out there for true browser isolation, where basically stuff is being opened on your behalf somewhere else, and you're just seeing a video or a screenshots or some representation of that. So your browser's not actually executing the code. It's the same thing in an Office doc. If we can load these in products in the cloud, get the stuff to execute, Tyler, like you were saying, in a sandbox that's not executing in my browser, it's a win. I think,
because if you're running
Microsoft's app browsers are still more safe than running a native desktop app, right? You're not getting those direct API hooks. You're sandboxed a little bit, so I think there's still going to be some intermingling there for a little while. But O365 has been doing a great job of blocking and protecting a lot of stuff, and they've, with the protected view and a lot of the stuff that they're moving to O365 for native viewing of applications, we have to get pretty creative to force downloads and auto executions, things like that, to make it work. So
but that's where the attack vector is going to come, because you can configure these isolation and sandboxing things to say, it's great, I can open all these websites, but I need to go to a website, I need to get a file. that happens quite often. And so, it's still going to be a vector in that.
And, of course, it's going to be tough to get people off of native desktop stuff as it is, because I've talked to some people and they're like, wait, what do you mean we're going to run this in the cloud? That sounds really risky. I'm like, it's not nearly as risky as letting those end users download macro-laden spreadsheets and run them as local admin.
I don't find it's all that hard to change. I mean, when you're working in the office environment, you're in the web interface to mail. You click on a file, it displays it.
It's really easy. I converted
on
mine.
Desktop, and you can click edit it.
It's just it's not fully functional or fully featured. I think that's where the big gap and why they still have the desktop app. Even the really nice E5 Tennessee with the web apps, you can run everything right in Teams even, but the full featured actual application that does a lot of the extra stuff that a lot of people still use for word processing is always going to be, I think, a desktop app for at least for a little while.
Well, you can't discount spreadsheets, and there's a lot of power users, serious power users. That depend on a lot of macro functionality in spreadsheets.
And people that have written their entire company's database system in Excel with macros, which it sounds crazy, but they do it.
We did a virtual training today with the folks from Vulcan Cyber, right? And he took multiple different feeds. So he took an OpenVAS report. He took a feed from ExploitDB. He made a list of his internal IP addresses and gave them a priority or risk score according to his own ranking, and plugged it all into Excel and basically prioritized like this huge vulnerability report using only Excel macros and code, and had imported all that data.
I've been saying it for years. Excel is an uber elite hacking tool.
But Joff, to your point, like when I look at Google Sheets, for example, it lacks some of the features that the full desktop Microsoft Excel would have.
And Office and 365 online in the browser,
it's
like
different.
Tyler said, it doesn't have all the features that like this heavy. And I mean, there's people that were writing full-blown applications inside of Excel using .NET or even prior to that, and that stuff's running on the local desktop, and it needs privileges, and it needs file storage space, and all kinds of stuff.
Now, I switched to Google Slides, and I basically was like, I don't need all those fancy features anymore, right? Like for a presentation,
it's hard to compete. What you're looking at here is it's hard to compete and turn a ship of a spreadsheet development from the Office product group that's been going 30 plus years, and have been responding to. I mean, Microsoft will tell you. I mean, Office pretty much drove the revenue of that company for years. So it's a very significant thing to change that, and they're going to do it very carefully. I think for us, it's going to remain a significant attack vector for some time. But the interesting thing is, it is slowly getting to the point where in the application platform, if you exclude browsers, it's almost the only attack vector left over. So Microsoft has done a lot of really, really good work in closing off a lot of other avenues. So life's going to get interesting. I think the security community is probably going to turn back around and start refocusing more on server-side vulnerabilities a little bit as we see this shift going on. As well as what Tyler said, we'll see a lot more focus on the browser, because the browser is slowly becoming that new operating system platform, and there's going to be avenues for exploitation there.
Sandbox breakouts.
There you go.
That's where it's going to be at.
Yep. And Joff, exactly to that, we've seen this sort of cat and mouse game for some time, when it was all about Microsoft Office exploits, and then it went back to server side, and then it went to browser, and maybe went back to server side. In the years that we've been doing this podcast, Paul, you and I can distinctly remember those shifts between all of those different platforms, and it's been an interesting thing to watch over the years.
Yeah, you're right, Larry. It's interesting when we look at. I was reading the book about Max Butler, right? And he went through the period where he was like in and out of jail, and he came out of jail, and he was trying to hack like it was before he was in prison. He was trying to remote exploits, and he's like, wow, it really has all gone to the client side, and started doing email phishing and switched to that, right? And I think there's been several kind of shifts in that whole attack vector kind of process, right? Where now maybe we're attacking via email, right? Some of the vectors are different because they might not be opening up those files inside of a local application. It might be in a cloud service, or we're trying to penetrate inside the cloud service or what have you, right? I mean, there's a whole host of attacks that largely we've talked about a little bit against O365 and Azure AD and things like that. I mean, that does change. There are some unique attacks there, and I feel like the landscape is shifting. Tyler, Larry, I think you guys have both talked about some of those newer attack vectors.
I think one of the big pieces of this that is going to be, and I've alluded to this before. This is something I've been trying to write up, is the more reliance we have on these SaaS applications and single sign-on together, the more important your credentials then become. Once your credentials are breached and the single sign-on happens, and you've got all these SaaS applications for an enterprise, you essentially have given away multiple systems across multiple platforms that may have no logging, may have disparate logging, may have confidential information, PII, PHI. Like, you'd be surprised what you can get from a general Slack company instance. You just run a search. Even if you're not part of any of the channels or don't have permissions, if it's not set to private, you can run searches and gain all kinds of documents, insights into problems. Help desk is usually a public channel, so you can see all the help desk issues happening or password resets, default passwords. So the single sign-on and SaaS reliance that we're moving to, I think will be it already is a huge new attack vector that is going to be abused further. And people are moving to the cloud outside of just AWS and Azure. These SaaS applications, like, where is your PO? Where are all your clients? Like, are you using like Salesforce or like HubSpot, for example? If someone got that single sign-on or got a JWT token that was abused or a password, that's potentially a lot of data that can lead to other, obviously, breach data that's pretty important.
Oh, that's an interesting one, because in HubSpot you can create workflows based on actions. So the company is using HubSpot to every time this happens, it's a form. Someone fills out a form, or something. Like, as an attacker, I've actually created these. You go in and you can send a web hook based on an action in HubSpot. So, like, basically every time someone fills out a form, you send a web hook to your Python Flask server you stood up in AWS.
Not even just internally, your customers are now at risk.
That's what I mean.
Right? And
right. That company's customers, right, fills out the form in HubSpot. Now I'm collecting all their information. It's basically like an email forwarder, except I can put it in your CRM.
And people and if you can get into like help desk ticketing, I mean, so much information is in those help desk tickets.
Yep.
Because I was looking through a big stack of help desk tickets once, and there were passwords, and you saw you saw IT people sending passwords to users and saying, this is your new password, and users saying, I've tried this password and this password and this password and none of them work, and they should try this one and stuff like that. I saw one where the person sent domain credentials to domain admin credentials to a user and said, just try this and see if you can log in like this, and all that was just in that stack of mail that you were essentially reading through. And it was just because, and they didn't have hardly any credentials on that system because you could just log right in.
Oh, that's a good segue into an article that was, not that one. How do I select password management solution for my business? What do you guys think of password managers in the enterprise?
Again, I think that's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Like, when properly implemented and training happens, then yeah, it's better than, I don't know if I'd even say it's better than writing them down. It's better than having a password text file or a password Excel sheet in a shared drive. But that also means there's a central repository of all the credentials needed to do things to your enterprise. And so therefore it's an easy objective, an easy goal, and one that's going to be targeted. So you better make sure you did it right. Now, the password managers handle some of the brokerages of the credentials, like CyberArk, where they're not even sending the password. They're doing a brokerage to the application and then resetting the password. I think those are fantastic. That's a very, very low probability of attack.
Yeah. Secrets vaults are way better.
Managers is messed up. It's a hard attack vector.
The user password manager is hard because you have one password that can access all of your passwords, right? And
Right.
I put two-factor on mine, right? But I mean, that could, that's up for debate. There's also the copying and pasting that happens to scrape individual logins inside the browser.
That's where the danger comes in. Yep.
Because those are they're sent through the clipboard.
So, advice to our listeners, though, if you're going to use a password vaulting solution, absolutely put two-factor on there. Just don't even think twice.
It's not an option. Yeah.
That's not optional, as well as having a very strong
and don't let
you can. The reason I brought that up is because you talked about users sharing passwords.
Right.
You can do that in a solution like LastPass, right? You can share securely passwords between vaults. That's better than putting it inside of a clear text,
letting it lay on the browsers or whatever. And then the other thing you have to remember is you have to be careful that those vaulting passwords don't be the same passwords that are being used all over the place, because those things get compromised and then credential stuffing comes around. And I could see going right after those vaulting solutions and going, wow, I got all these passwords. I might as well see if I can get into LastPass because their password's Big Daddy 69 on every system they use. So if I can get into that. That was a real password, mind you.
Mental note.
The other point, though, I'd want to emphasize is what Paul made, and that is that if we get access to an endpoint, monitoring the clipboard is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because people do copy and paste a lot more credential data in and out of the clipboard now because of these solutions, and that that's potentially a weak point. If there is a C2 channel or something like that running on that system.
And don't forget the lowly keystroke logger. I've done a couple of PI cases where all it took was a spouse stuck a keystroke logger on the system and got all those passwords. They had the LastPass password. They had everything, and then they could get in because she just handed them all to me, and she was like, "Yo, I got them all."
Longer term engagements, right? That you have to wait to type it. Jeff.
It was going to be a comment, but it's now kind of a question. I don't use password vaults, password managers. I'm old-fashioned and don't believe in them. I will concede that in respect to all you need is one password. It's probably better to have all your employees use a vault rather than expect all of them are going to pick strong passwords. I'll give you that. I'm curious about the sharing of passwords within a password manager or password vault. Do people that share passwords like that, are they logging into the vault with their own credentials, or do they use a common credential to get into the vault to get to the shared? Okay.
No, you're sharing accounts, and the credentials aren't always shared. It's often you can tell it to either show the credential or just share the tokenization of that, and that just logs you in. So there's two options there for most password vaults now.
So my original comment was going to be, if you share, even with a password vault, you're failing PCI, because PCI prohibits the use of shared accounts and shared IDs. But I'm wondering if there's a way to get beyond that, given the unique features that a vault. Right? I'm sorry?
I said you're using your own ID because you have to log into that vault with your own credentials, and then the shared credential itself is then between those accounts and can be revoked. So would that fix that requirement?
Well, I mean, typically a shared account is a privileged account most of the time. Whether it's the root account or the domain account or, an application or database account or something like that. But it's typically privileged.
But this is about the same account with the same credentials. So if I log in as root on the server here and I want to go somewhere else and log in as root on the server, that's the sharing they're talking about, not me and you sharing the same account, which is what I think you're getting at with the PCI. I mean, that was how we were interpreting those PCI requirements in audit, was I can't give Paul my credentials and we all use the same account. But this thing is like, I want to log into Bank of Citizens, and I go on Bank of Citizens on this machine, and I use my meta credential to log into the vaulting, and then it gives me my credentials for Bank of Citizens, and then I switch over to my home machine at home, and it's the same credential in both places, but that's because it's the same account in both places.
Yeah, also you may provision a new account for a user or change their password and share those in a secure manner, not share your we always try and create a different user within whatever system.
For the record, both scenarios that Dr. White described are not allowed by PCI.
Well, how can I, if I have an account like my email, and I need to log into it from my laptop sitting here so I can get my email, and I need to log into it from my other machine over there to get to my email, you're saying I have to set up different usernames and credentials for both those?
No, I'm saying you can't share it with another person.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that...
and also, you can't use a root account with the same password across multiple systems.
But yeah, so what I'm saying is what I was telling you there, though, is as you go, as a single person, an individual goes from some account, they use the same account on different platforms, they can get those credentials from their Meta account in the vault. But yeah, I'm not sharing my password with Paul, and we both have the same account called Security Weekly, and we both log in with that.
Yeah, vaulting is different uses.
Yeah, that's not the kind of sharing you're talking about with the vaulting. I mean, I guess you could do that, but that would
vaulting twists all kinds
defeat the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, vaulting can give you a different password every time that you log in based on your identity. Yeah.
And then all this kind of
Bomgar.
That's right.
That's now Beyond Trust.
Yep.
Had an awesome solution.
That's a cool one, yeah.
A really awesome solution.
I like that one. And then all this kind of loops back around to what we were talking about at the beginning. I was looking a lot at like Microsoft Hello the other day, and one of their big campaigns there is to put facial recognition on, with your webcam, and now you don't use anything except that, and it's going to cover all of your accounts. And so you sit down at that machine, the facial recognition looks at you and says you're good to go, and then you can get into all this stuff. And I was like, okay, that's a pretty scary vector right there.
It happens on your phone too. And just one last point on the password vault. If you're an administrator, what I do and recommend to other administrators as well is you don't put all your eggs in one vault or one basket, right? So put most of your stuff in there so you can maintain really good passwords without having to remember them all. But I take like my Google account, that's got a separate password, it's not in the vault, and it has a separate two-factor, right? The sites you use to administer your domains, your Amazon, AWS, things of like really high value, targeted accounts, I don't put in my vault. I'll maintain a separate password for that, and sometimes even a second two-factor that's different from the vault. So you have to create, I still believe in degrees of separation in all your accounts. Right?
And you need a password hierarchy. I mean, if you're going to play the password game, you have to have a prioritization of passwords, like how risky is this password? Right. You have to have different passwords on everything you do, and you have to have a mechanism keeping up with all that, and you have to be careful about what you put and where you put it. Because
to me, the vault is for everything else except for my really high profile.
Yeah, because you stick them in there and somebody gets that one login, you're done. You're screwed. And if they don't have a login, it's some kind of compromise of this cloud-based thing or whatever.
Now, Google does a good job, and I'm not sure as pen testers how you guys get around this. Google does and Microsoft too, do a great job of, if you're logging in from a different browser or IP address, they're going to flag that, send the user an email, or challenge you with two-factor. That's got to trip you up sometimes.
Oh, yeah. For me, that trips me up all the time.
Like personally.
We talked about this, about the email thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
You owning the account can't log in. Never mind you trying to take over someone else's credentials and log in with them. Now you got to hack their phone.
Speaking of taking things over, 2,800 unsecured printers.
Oh, this is this is dicey, right? And research, this comes out every once in a while, I would say, where we talk about the vigilante security researchers, or vigilante hackers as we call them. A lot of times they do prey on printers because if you can find a vulnerable printer on the internet and you can send it a print job, you can send someone a message, right? Yeah. And I don't pretend to know all the legalities behind it. However, I consult with a lawyer before you embarked on this journey. But I thought the statistics were interesting. What's that?
That allowed this. I want to know who their lawyer is that allowed this, because
they didn't consult their lawyer, because I don't think I don't know.
No lawyer is going to say, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, hack into other people's printers. Like, that's not a CFA violation.
I used to send my neighbor messages from the CIA on his printer because he had an open port. This is like long before there was anything illegal back in like the like late 80s, and he had an open printer port on this early internet stuff, and I would send messages, and we used to do it at school. You could just figure out the port number and send stuff to it all the time. It's quite a bit of amusement.
They managed to hijack 27,944 printers out of the 50,000 devices they targeted, a 56% success rate. They can presume that 800,000 internet-connected printers across the world, at least 447 are unsecured.
Yep.
And they targeted 50,000 and got into 27,944.
When they say unsecured, what do they mean? Do they mean that it has the default credentials for browser? I mean, a lot of these printers are designed to be able to print to remotely. That's kind of the point on a lot of these. There's a legitimate business function used for this. Yeah, I would think it would be better to lock it down and restrict who can do that. But you're talking about like Kinko's, you're talking about public printers, you're talking about universities. Like some of this is designed to be public.
A lot of them have like open web browsers. So if you know the IP of the printer, you can just literally log into it, and they often don't have any password changes. You can just use admin and get in.
So I'm
they were using Showdown to find them.
I think the story falls short, right? I agree. You can say 28,000 printers are vulnerable. Okay, great, but give us the follow up. I mean, okay, you log into it. Maybe you can grab a print job and grab some data. Okay, that's one thing. Yes, bad. What I would say is, can you leverage that to steal credentials from the organization and pivot into that network? Now we're talking.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So
the story's incomplete.
Yeah, I agree.
I have some problems with the language specifically used in this article. They said it was a hack or a hijack of these 27,000 printers, and I would argue they did neither.
Yeah.
They sent a print. It appears that they sent a print job to a printer that allowed printing to the internet.
Right.
It doesn't look like the default use of credentials. It doesn't look like the connection to websites. It's just that they were set up as printers to print, and they sent a print job to it, and it came out of the printer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
is it poor security practice? Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, you've got to give us more than that. That's insufficient.
There's a lot of different ways to print, and I think their research could have been more exhaustive and been in different categories of all the different printing protocols. Then the build the matrix, right? The first tier of that is, can I just print with no authentication? And then the second tier is, if it requires a password, do I need to enter the password to do it, right? Then there's, can I log into the admin interface and expose and or configure it to print? And then there's, it's vulnerable to something, and even though it's disallowing me to print to it, I can still print to it because of a vulnerability, right? So I think that's what everyone's kind of hitting on.
But it's just like a mischief attack the way they wrote it up.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, I can cause your printer to print a whole bunch of sheets, but I can't do anything else.
Right. I mean, there are very well documented attacks. I tested a couple myself where you could hijack the print queue, right? And get it to send you a copy of all the print jobs going through it. You can.
Those are fun.
Superimpose text on every print job going through the printer. Mm-hmm. I did that.
I saw that one.
Sam was like, "Can we not have the ASCII art penis print on every page that goes to?" I'm like, "Oh, let me remove that."
on all of our proposals to customers.
Yeah, I had to take that out.
My favorite would be if I can compromise the printer and then relay the credentials of anybody authenticating that printer back to me.
Yep.
And fun.
Yeah. I agree, Jeff. Yeah, getting domain credentials from printers
and
getting sensitive documents that are stored. I mean, there's a lot of different. I've pulled off documents with social security numbers off of multifunction devices that were storing devices that were being copied, faxed, or printed, right?
And there's a new vector evolving here because almost all the end user type printers now are starting to have all these print from the internet. So I have a printer that you can send a print job to an email address, and it will forward that print job to your printer if you enable that feature. And again, that doesn't get you some kind of lateral movement or anything.
Canon has an app now where you can.
Well, yeah,
from your
it
phone,
has a phone app. You can control it. But as they keep adding functionality that's pulled off-site with the assumption that home users are going to, because the instructions for the printer we bought recently, there's a lot of instruction there about opening ports. To allow this stuff to communicate over the internet. And I'm like, okay, you're opening ports into your house, so obviously something's going to communicate.
Wrong, I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, Google has the cloud print too thing.
Yeah, HP does. Right. They all have cloud print functions.
And I mean, the times you need to print things are kind of.
If you print in the cloud, where do you pick up the printout?
Right.
Down at the print center, Jeff, just like you used to do.
The cloud print center. I don't know. We took a ferry. We took a ferry, and we needed to print out tickets. But it turns out we didn't need to print them out. They could read it from our phone. It was just a pain in the butt to scroll through. like because it'd be 5 people in the family, so they have to scan 5 tickets, and it was kind of a pain. It would have been easier to have them printed out, but it wasn't a requirement.
Has anyone been in that experience? And I've done this where I go to the airport and I'm like, I got my tickets on my phone and I'm like, good to go, and I pull up the app and I can't retrieve the damn boarding pass. Like, fuck.
Yep.
I always screenshot it in case that happens.
Yeah,
too.
I always screenshot it, and then I just
I learned the hard way. I
phone
screenshot
times
it
out
too.
and it goes dark, and then you have to unlock it.
Well, yeah. Or your battery dies when you get up to the counter and you're going, no, I'm really not a bad person. I mean, on my phone, really, the battery's dead, and you start waving stuff in the TSA people's face. Yeah, that's how you get strip searched.
Tyler, I wanted to talk about this one. You had it as one of your stories. Facebook is saying Apple's new privacy rules will hamper its ad service. I've read a couple of these articles. I thought was a good quote from it. Here it is. They say Facebook explains that it and many advertising partners rely on the Identifier for Advertisers IDFA feature. This is what allows advertisers to track users across different apps and websites. With iOS 14, Apple's adding a new privacy protection such that developers will be required to ask for permission before tracking a user across apps or websites. I, as an end user, think this is a great thing. I want to see this feature on Android as well. I want to be in control of whether or not I allow this feature because I think it's kind of creepy. I'm kind of tired of seeing the same ads for like whatever I just bought on Amazon. Now I'm seeing similar ads like on Facebook and vice versa.
So that is a comment that is directly related to the persistent and insidious intrusion of its surveillance capitalism into our lives. Facebook is saying, don't get in the way of my revenue stream. That's what they're saying.
Yeah. Because they want to see what I'm buying on Amazon so they can recommend similar stuff on Facebook in their advertisements in hopes that I'll buy from them. And people who are selling stuff will give Facebook more money to pay for advertisements because they're making more money because they're able to target users more accurately. Now, one side of it is like, well, yeah, okay, I mean, it's tailoring my advertising, but my bigger question is what else are they doing with that data and how deep does the rabbit hole go?
That goes really deep.
Right?
Really
my
deep.
purchasing habits, I think, are being monetized, and I'm basically being raped over and over again.
That rabbit hole goes way up inside your butthole. Yeah.
It's really bad. I mean, it's so bad. Like, I can, like, you can track the algorithms, right? Like, what I search on Google and what I buy on Amazon and what I see in ads on Facebook are so closely related now. Like, you could trick it to showing you whatever you wanted, right? And then
it's the same database. Your IDF is actually tied between multiple vendors, and that data can be purchased. There's separate companies that do all this together, and then you purchase acquisition of that data. So, this the IDF and stuff is a problem, but the same token goes for Apple, right? Like we seen the big thing with Epic Games this morning. And Apple and Epic Games went to battle, and Epic Games is like, you know what, screw you, Apple. We want an open internet where people can choose how they pay, and they don't want to have to pay through Apple. And so if you're not going to allow us to have our own pay platform, then your iOS users and Mac users are not going to get any new seasons for Fortnite.
I was going to say, Epic Games is Fortnite, right? I mean, that's a huge... I mean, I like every day my middle son's like, Dad, can I buy V-Bucks? I'm like, son, you need to realize that, like, they call them V-Bucks, but that's actual money.
Bucks.
It's actual money, right? Like, this is the whole, I had to explain to him the whole sociology, like, the psychology behind it all. Like, oh, it's just V-Bucks. Like, how much money is Epic Games making off of these kids buying V-Bucks?
A lot.
A ton.
Just like
so much money.
Just like all pay-as-you-go games. Yes. I mean, pay-as-you-go games are just insidious. I mean, you get these things, and it's just like some dinky little game, and they're smart because they're going, oh, it doesn't cost very much, like $1. And I remember
100 V-Bucks.
No, I know, but I mean, it's like in the game, it's like, oh, this costs 100 V-Bucks. That's like 50 cents, or I don't know what it is, but and you go, yeah, 50 cents, so what? And the next thing you know, you're going, I've been playing this like for 3 hours, and you go, wow, I just spent like 250 bucks so I could actually like invade that castle or whatever.
I opened up a separate credit card, and that credit card, every time a charge is made, I get a text message.
Oh my God.
So that, like, I could monitor. I'm like, guys, if you buy something, I'm gonna get a text message, and I'm gonna know that you bought something. Don't.
That's a good idea.
Do that.
Actually.
That is a very good idea.
Because if sometimes you need some kind of payment method. Sometimes it's cheaper, like on Xbox, to maintain a subscription.
Yeah.
Which means you have to put a credit card in your account. But if there's a credit card in your account, kids will buy stuff, right?
Of course, I agree.
So all I do is I switched it to one that sends me text messages.
No, that's
like
smart.
when you guys buy stuff, like I'm gonna go ask you right away, and you better have the money for me. Like you better have done chores and had the money for me, because if you don't, you're off the device. It's gone.
Take control.
You're
Paul.
off the
Right?
device.
Take
And now
control.
you're going to have to work twice to earn the money for the
Exactly.
chores that you did, because now
Well,
you're going to pay me double because you're
But
going to
if you don't, like a lot of things in security, right? If you don't get ahead of the problem and are proactive with it, it can really. Don't wait till the end of the month to check your bill. Now you're $200, $300, or $900 in the hole because you haven't been keeping.
Well, that's
an eye
like those
on it.
old stories about people that were getting these like $20,000 cell phone bills because people were sending texts, and it was like the 25 cents a text, and they were like, oh, my daughter sent 6,000 texts last week.
Oops.
Do V-Bucks float, or are they fixed? Can you arbitrage them? Like, can you buy futures on V-Bucks? And so
no.
they're
It's a flat rate. You buy them,
and it doesn't ever change.
Doesn't change. No.
Oh, that's too bad. I mean, you could set up a whole financial trading industry around V-Bucks.
Dude, I would totally buy stock in V-Bucks.
Oh, I would too. Yeah.
Kids on Fortnite, man. Like
they're like crazy.
They've targeted an age group and gotten so big now they can go head to head with Apple, which I think is awesome.
I mean, that's a pretty ballsy move. I'm not going to lie. And honestly, it's from the perspective of going to bat. Like, if you're going to do it, like, this was probably the only time you could ever get away with it, is if you had that much subscription buy-in from a user base.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a big shift of people off of it, or Apple. I don't think Apple's going to concede. Like, they're trying to put the blame back on Epic, just saying, like, comply with our EULA or terms of service.
Well, I think Epic knows their user base is going to go to an Xbox or PC platform and be like, well, I can't play it on Apple anymore, so what?
Let's move somewhere else.
I'm going to move somewhere else because it's well supported on Microsoft.
But they made us use it as a way to negotiate a better rate. So if Apple says, well, we might cut you a little slack on the percentage we take off every transaction, then that could be like,
And it is a high volume of transactions. Like, and
crazy.
Epic, they created a huge partnership with Marvel. And like all my son is talking about lately is how all the Marvel characters are coming into and not just the ones in the movies. Like, he's like, Dad, Galactus is going to be in Fortnite. I'm like, that's pretty awesome. Like, I kind of want to, like, I'll buy you some V-Bucks if you let me play, because like Galactus is pretty awesome.
I had to learn how to play with my son so I could spend some time and figure out what he was talking about, and like, he just follows me around and protects me in the game, and I thought it was a pretty good game until I see these guys.
Yep.
So when is everybody going to make the realization they are slowly succumbing to Skynet? Because that is what's happening here.
It is totally Skynet. Exactly.
Yeah.
I only debate whether it's slow.
What do you mean?
Or is it fast?
Skynet still can't do facial recognition correctly. Apparently there's gender bias. And I had to read this article to be like what it meant about gender bias and how that kind of played into it. And it's somewhat sensational, and I think they're making somewhat of a bigger deal about the whole gender thing. However, when you dig into the data and how it's being misinterpreted or misrepresented in artificial intelligence, it is kind of concerning, because they evaluated solutions, and basically the AI was misidentifying women 18% more often than men. So consequences means, smartphones could block access. A police officer using facial recognition could mistakenly identify an innocent bystander as a criminal, right? And they talked about the differences in the data sets of women being misidentified more often than men were. And I'm not sure how that ends up in the AI system, if that's the data that's going in, if there's not enough data.
I think it's limited on number of points that are used in that system.
Yeah.
I guess just aren't sufficient to get because people think it's like looking at your whole face, but it's really just looking at, it's like 6 or so. I mean, there's just certain key points, and you really need a much more robust mapping of somebody's face in order to do that, and that they've never changed. That article was talking about this guy in the 60s who really invented this whole thing, and they're primarily still using the same algorithm for facial recognition. Even with AI, the AI is just learning from that same set of data instead of actually allowing the AI to expand, because that is how you get robocops.
My facial recognition on my phone will recognize me if I have a cigar in my mouth.
Yeah, mine too. And
glasses
on, glasses off.
I think I've trained
Won't do it with a mask.
Either it's because of limitations in the algorithm or because it's been trained?
If I pull a mask down to about right here, it works. You just get it below those points, and it's there.
Yeah. Isn't the algorithm still basically is triangulating your face and getting key points off of your face, right? Nose, forehead, cheek, chin, right? And that's basically what it's doing. So, yeah, it's there's not enough processing power for it to actually really do facial recognition down to the pore, right?
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Well, when iOS introduced their Face ID, they went from, I don't know how many points were used for the fingerprint, which was 1 in 50,000 accurate, to like 30,000 points on your face, which is 1 in 1 million accurate. So it can still make an error, but it's a lot closer. I don't have the data on what Android's doing anymore, but they're trying to raise the bar. But I'm thinking things like the recognition that Amazon's doing is, like Doug said, not as many points, so it's easier to make an error.
Well, they're using different data sets, right? Like there's a standard of data sets that you play against, and it's a known, I think it was like Berkeley or one of those developed a ML data set for facial recognition that has been used as a standard, right? The stuff that is being used by Apple or Android for like logging into a phone is utilizing a different algorithm, different mechanism. Facial recognition from the standpoint of LE or something like Amazon's facial recognition, which we've been using quite a bit of, plays that against databases and analyzing features that are similar and then giving a comparative score. And so that's a little bit different than looking at multiple points for a yes or no, do all the points match, and what is the probability between all these points. And the level of camera and sophistication of like whether you're using infrared or it's a 3D camera, how late is the operating system, like all those things actually play a huge role in the quality of facial recognition that the phone can do. And so I think there's kind of two different things from facial recognition for authentication, which is a metric or a hashed algorithm of whatever points they're looking at, versus facial recognition where they're coming to find you and they're comparing you against a database of people, and whether or not all those facial recognition points that Apple takes every time you look at your phone to unlock it and go back to a database, whether those are actually stored, that's a whole other question, right? Because then now you've got a pretty accurate data set for individuals that is tied to a digital fingerprint or a digital footprint.
Yeah.
Tyler, I really love your article on the Russian arrested for trying to recruit an insider, because it really does read like a movie.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, just before we did the microtransactions one, Tyler's story number 8, he'll have to review for us because it requires a microtransaction for you to get access to the article from the Financial Times. But what was this one? The Russians?
So basically a Russian cyber criminal, I guess you'd call him, came to the U.S., tried to bribe someone to put malware on a company in Nevada, put it on their systems. It was reported to the FBI. But you read the account, it kind of is like in every movie where there's an evil bad person. Right before they're about to kill the protagonist in the film, the evil bad person explains their entire motivation and all their plans for everything evil that they want to do. The monologue, right? Sounds like that kind of happened here.
I want you to die, Mr. Bond.
He was just spilling his beans. This is how everything works in our organization, right?
I want to see it.
Me to do? Talk?
No, Mr. Bond.
You to die. Yeah, that's all fiction. That never happens.
We've seen this week about people being recruited and or being convicted of espionage, right? We had the one from 97 from Russia as well, and then the Chinese recruit as well, I think last week. So the espionage game is still well underway, and people don't realize that they're at risk and may often not know what they're being recruited for. It may sound like a business deal. It may sound like a company or a job change where you're providing them information for competitive analysis, right? Like these are real people that are good at what they do.
Yep.
And I think we're going to be in that age where they're going to rely on human just as much as we're relying on the digital espionage in conjunction, as if it's not been going on already, right?
Well, they're expanding. So used to espionage targeted like classified stuff and government agencies, but now it's like, it's big business to get people into companies, and you may be a company that makes, sugary treats or something, and they just want to get malware into your network because they may be able to use that to get into other networks or whatever. So they
maybe you have vending machines in the government, right?
Absolutely. You may be the jobber who puts Twinkies in the vending machine on the airbase, and because the vending machine is connected back to your networks and whatever, and they didn't train all those people. So the people on the line down there that make minimum wage, they didn't train all of them. Like we all had to go to training about, how you're going to be approached in bars, because I remember going to that training, and they're like, well, when a woman approaches you in a bar, and I was like, dude, if a woman ever approaches me in a bar, I assure you it's some kind of espionage, because that's never, ever happened ever in my life. And
she would look just like Natasha Romanoff.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The vending machine would have the USB key, not a Twix bar.
Exactly.
That was Civil War.
As
that was
opposed to
Captain
the rest
America
of us
Civil War.
Captain American Civil War, yeah.
As opposed to the rest of us where it happens all the time.
I know. I'm not like you, Joff.
It's harder to distinguish.
I don't have the sexy plus model microphone to attract people.
I mean,
or the accent.
Paul remembers me being in Boston.
It's all about the accent.
It is. It works.
We're in Boston together. Paul's like, Joff, you're just like a chick magnet. What's going on?
He totally is.
Him and Aaron. I mean, it's like they just,
It's the accent.
Aaron just
they
like,
both have an accent. Yes.
That Irish accent.
Yep. And Paul, speaking of chick magnets, we haven't heard from Carlos in forever.
I know. What happened to Carlos?
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, what's up with Carlos?
I don't know.
He's living the large life over Trusted Sec.
Trusted Sec. Yep. He's taking
not
back
allowed
service.
to speak to us
Twitter
anymore.
every once in a while.
No, he's got like 3 kids now, and
but some jobs are not very favorable towards doing this.
Yeah,
true.
he's busy.
He's busy. Well, with family and work, right?
Well, but that too. But some people you work for are like, no, you can't do that.
No, but Dave would never say that.
No, that's true. Yeah, Dave would not.
I doubt Dave would do that.
No, you're right.
And if he did, Paul would just jump up and down naked with him on a bed and it would be all set.
Yeah,
we'd go cook some barbecue together.
That's how it works, man.
Kennedy's
I was jealous.
They would smoke their meat together.
Oh man, he cooked a brisket. I was jealous. He found a good, nice brisket. I have working my way up to brisket.
Man, whenever Dave is posted on Twitter, it makes me hungry. I mean, it's like, right? Dave, stop it, man.
All right, we all need to show up at his house sometime. Once all the coronavirus.
We're gonna get the security weekly bus, and we'll just show up at his house.
We'll just show up.
You could just come here.
We're broadcasting from here. Let's put a pork shoulder.
He doesn't know it till he sees the show airing, and we're sitting out in front of his house.
Hey, now Larry and I can do some mean barbecue as well, so you could all just come here, and Larry and I will barbecue, right, Larry?
It sounds like a plan. That's an easier plan to achieve, actually.
Right? I mean, you're all going to come here anyway at some point. So I'm talking about getting a smoker for the studio.
Oh, wow.
It's very nerdy.
It'll be sitting right here every night.
That's it. It's very nerdy. Very nerdy.
The studio's already pretty smoky.
It is pretty smoky, yeah.
It's true. You never know the difference.
Yeah, not that kind of smoke, though. The good-smelling kind of smoke.
Medical data has been leaked on GitHub due to developer errors.
Oh, no.
Basically, don't do this stuff. Now, I'm guilty of doing some of this stuff, too. Don't get me wrong. I'm the first to admit as a developer, I do some of this bad shit.
You should recuse yourself.
So this is the pot calling the kettle black. However, do as I say, not as I do. Embedding hard-coded login credentials in code instead of making them a configuration option. Guilty. I mean, we're all guilty of that at some point. Everyone's done that, but don't do that.
Don't do that.
Using public repositories instead of private ones. Now, here's where I'm very careful. In fact, I need to create some public repositories, but I'm kind of afraid that I'll get my wires crossed between the private and public ones.
True.
Because I make mistake number 1, keeping all your repositories private and not getting I can see where that could happen, right?
Which is why PCI requires separation of duties.
Yes.
Between dev and production.
Failing to use 2-factor or multi-factor authentication for email accounts and or your Git account. Now, I can also see where that comes in because if you configure Jenkins or some other CI/CD pipeline tool that needs to automatically pull code from a repository, if you're requiring 2-factor on every account, now you're going to makes things more complicated, right?
I mean, if you have two-factor on something like GitHub, you can authorize application keys.
Yep.
Specifically for that purpose.
Yep. Good point, Larry. Good point.
Yeah. There's a workaround that's a well implemented, safe, secure kind of workaround. So
some of this is just bad practice in coding, and you got used to doing that because it's always like
but it's
local.
not so much coding, Doug. It's more operational in the CI/CD pipeline.
Well, it
right?
is, but it's still part of that coding development process where you get used to doing that stuff on a private box, and then all of a sudden, as you've expanded, you see it all the time on S3 or something like that, where people are pushing data that should be private because they're trying to move into the cloud. They've always done it this way, and they just bundle it up and stick it out there, and they don't think about other people can see this.
Abandoning repositories instead of deleting them when no longer needed.
Yeah,
that's a big one. I keep the older repositories out there. I'm like, in case I ever need to refer.
Everybody does.
I got a lot of code that wasn't mine in those older repositories, and I'm like, what if I needed to refer back to it? But there's got to be a way to archive it and delete it, right?
Well, you pull it back off, pull it down, burn it, and
pull
put
the
it away.
request, and then delete it, right? And now I have it located.
Disk space is cheap.
I mean, the other one is leaving keys and certificates and stuff in repos. And actually, I had an interesting experience just this past week. I pushed up a repo to GitHub, and they sent me an email message saying, "Dude, you got a private key in your repo."
They do that now.
Which I like. I really appreciate that.
I do too.
Deliberate. It's just a bogus key for a TLS service.
But at least you know.
GitLab does the same thing.
Yeah.
GitLab's got some really good features. Cool. They've got a big security push. I think Matt's been talking to some folks over there.
So Joff, what was the end result of yours?
Of mine?
Yeah, I mean, you clearly wanted it there. So did they allow it, or they delete it, or what happened?
Oh no, it really was just a proactive warning. They were not interested in interfering. They just wanted to let me know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get warners.
So and I it forced me to go look and remind myself exactly what I'd done, and that's the action that you would desire, right?
OS dot environ. Yeah. I mean, you can in containers, right, or even regular code, you just read it from an environment variable. That way, it's not sitting in your source code repository. Yeah. That gets you to a certain level of protection, and then from there you got to look at a secrets vault, kind of what we were talking about before. And then there's some really awesome things you can do with secrets vaults. We were interviewing Brian Kelly from CyberArk on the Conjure team. Conjure, which is like an application level secrets vault. And you have a vault, and then you've got a broker to your vault. I mean, it was just awesome. Go look up that interview on Enterprise Security Weekly. But all of that takes a lot of time and planning, right? So there's different levels. Not in your code is the first step. Using environment variables, second step. I think having a secrets vault is the next step. Then having a secrets vault with its individual brokers is kind of.
But you need to be moving in that direction.
You have to be. Agreed, Doug. Agreed. Also, I don't know. I kind of want to look at GitLab too, because Git written by Linus Torvalds. Is that true?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Or is he like the architect?
A quick Google could probably work that out.
I want to say Linus wrote Git, right?
Yeah, and people in their cars and Discord are screaming at us right now.
Yeah, Linus Torvalds invented Git.
Said it was Linus.
Yeah, and so like Linus hates people, and when I get frustrated with Git, I remember like, oh, Linus wrote it and he hates me. So therefore, that's why I'm in the situation I'm in.
So go get another drink.
Read some more documentation.
And lie down until the urge passes.
And don't screw it up. Like, don't create the heinous merge thing. More branches are better.
Branch, baby,
branch. That's what we've been doing. Basically, like anytime you want to make a change now, you create a separate branch, you do it in that branch, and you stay in one part of the code in that branch, and then you merge that branch back in.
Submit a pull, and yep.
Yeah, more branches are better, is what I found. In any case.
So there were a couple of Lee stories that I wanted to hit.
Oh, I got to scroll up to Lee's stories. Lee.
Yeah, let's go crazy with Lee.
Yeah.
Right,
so
which one
Lee, in no particular order, I really liked 2 and 3.
Well, I thought the university one was number 3 was interesting. They were hacked and ransomware, and they put all their stuff back, and then the threat actors just said, okay, you won't pay us, we'll publish all your shit.
Yep.
And they did, or they started to, and the university paid up because of all the risks around disclosure.
It's the modern way.
Yep.
I mean, what are your options there? As you think through it, and if your business came up against this, and I've dealt with several of these privately, like what are the options available?
Yeah, well, so one of the other ones, Tyler, that I recently heard the story about some folks that had gotten ransomwared, and they went back to the threat actors, as Lee so eloquently put it, and said, "We'll pay the ransom only if you destroy the data that you got.
Yeah,
destroy your copy of the data." And I'm like, "How are you going to
verify that?"
And verify that. And
that's like Doug's story from last week.
The data, the copy, but the other copies in the S3 buckets and that we put on the dark web, yet we didn't delete those because that wasn't the copy you asked for.
Prove you destroyed that software that was accused of copyright, and you sent them a picture of the floppies on fire in the driveway, right?
Floppies are burning in the driveway. Therefore, we must have destroyed all that data.
And now that it's all digital, how do you prove that it was destroyed?
Yeah, you can't.
Fire?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good question. What do you do at that point? Because if they're saying, we're going to release all this student data, and then you're going to get sued. So this is what they're doing now, and they can release a little at a time, and they do the proof of life thing where they send you back copies of the unencrypted data and say, here's the president's expense report from last month, and how much of this would you like us to release before you pay?
You know what I think you do? You use a core artificially intelligent machine learning blockchain and leverage your core competencies seeking synergy to solve the problem.
Well,
drink.
That's a good investment, John.
How many times do we have to drink for that one?
I
think John needs a bottle.
6 or 7 buzzwords in one long sentence. I think we have to drink heavily.
Lee, that's not the right bottle, my friend. You needed something a little harder.
I'm just going to put Joff in a spandex suit and drop him out of a plane and let him land on the guys.
I'm here to Murgatroyd you to death. Oh man.
So, I was thinking the second story I had, which was an APT group that was working on USB devices. When I see infected USB coming in, I'm thinking, really, why aren't you checking your USB for malware or doing something on it, or even allowing foreign stuff in? But I know that's a little bit unrealistic. But
this thing worked in a lot of different directions, though. I read about this thing, and basically it not only could come in on a USB, but it had a mechanism to spread to USBs. And so it was a lot like a lot of those really old floppy disk viruses, in that when it got on a system...
You mean like Stuxnet?
Well, Stuxnet, Stone.
Exactly.
Well, wasn't it more Dooku and Flame? I think Dooku and Flame had a USB copy.
Stoned.
There's Stone, right? There's a lot of...
Stoned was my favorite. It was the first one I ever saw. It was the first time I ever saw like a virus like that. And
we got to put that in context, though, because in the days of Dooku and Stuxnet, USBs did have an auto-run feature.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that was done away with by Microsoft.
And that was a really smart move to do.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that malware cannot be resident in a system, detected, inserted USB, and write itself to that USB.
Exactly.
That is still absolutely a vector, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's probably the most common and useful vector, right? Joff is you're trying to get a file dropped so that a secondary loader or some secondary application that's going to come in a different way utilizes that either payload or stager or dropper functionality that gets placed by a second USB. Right. That's kind of the whole goal of most of the USB malware.
Yeah, split, honestly, or otherwise said,
there's no real good protection against, like, there are USB group policy rules, there are device guard and application whitelisting, obviously, but from that standpoint, like, people have to use USBs, and if these USBs are leveraging things like a dual boot firmware, like some of the Ducky or Bash Bunnies, where you're getting a HID device, and often our HID device is emulating whatever keyboard manufacturer, computer manufacturer picked up by an AutoScript, then you're really going to have a hard time blocking HID devices. You're going to have a hard time blocking USB devices in most corporations. So the protections are, other than scanning and hoping for some general heuristics, like it becomes very difficult to solve this problem.
I have a customer that actually will detect if any USB HID device is inserted into any computer in his organization.
That is a registry key, so I mean, you should be able to.
Yeah, but doesn't it detect when anyone plugs in a keyboard?
It does.
It does.
But how often does their employees actually unplug their keyboard? Right.
So that HID device, Semantic does that, right? That's a Semantic. Semantic does it. I know,
you can turn that on, and I mean that's a. I mean, but if you've got thousands, but if you see that trigger, it would be nice to get that in your SIM and say, oh, somebody just plugged the USB device in. That's a violation of policy. Let's go find out.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting. I actually have a story where we were physically red teaming our customer, and we ran in there with I can't remember what it was, rubber ducky, something like that, and plugged it in, and managed to achieve payload execution, and ran out. And the only reason our guy that got into the office and did this didn't get caught is because the system admin had to go pee.
Happens.
That's awesome.
Got lucky.
So one of the the other things that I came out of this story with was reading through it, that I think what the industry needs is two things. It needs, one, a listing and the ability to map all of the names for the APT groups and their tools. So, for example, this one was Transparent Tribe, also known as Project M and Mythic Leopard. Like, every vendor gives the APT groups a new name, just like we used to back in the AV days. Like, it was Nachia, Welchia, 32, any of the, like, they're all the same, or are they? But they have different names from the different vendors. And the different vendors call their remote access Trojans or something else, their attack framework, something different. And then it even gets down into, like, we have Cactus Pete that was known as something else that uses something else. And the other one, I think that where many of these tools intersect, we need a mind map of which APT groups are using which tools and where they intersect. So I threw that as a project to the community.
New business.
MITRE has some of that, actually.
There's a couple of mind maps, and there's a couple forums that several groups and universities have put out that map each one of those, and there's some disparity between a couple of the groups and like what they've attributed to them, but for the most part, some of those are fairly accurate. I'll send some links so someone can post them in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
This
Put them in
is
Discord
also
so
known
everybody
as
can see them.
APT36 consistently. It's not as sexy as Transparent Tribe or Project N, but that when you find the APT and a number, that's generally consistent across different sources. But the sexy names are more fun.
They're more fun, yeah.
Right. But different groups give different sexy names to APT numbers.
That's true.
So,
Any of you guys follow the Tesla hacking or modding activities and groups that are out there?
I look at it longingly sometimes.
Yeah, like
tangentially and longingly.
I don't own a Tesla. I mean,
I want one.
I want one. I think it's really cool.
You know, my biggest regret with Tesla is I didn't hold on to the stock last year.
Yeah,
$300.
Tell me about it.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh, Elon's gone crazy. I'm selling. And then, it's like, he's crazy, all right. But, hey, that doesn't matter.
He's crazy, but now he just did a 5-for-1 split when his stock was like $600.
But since the car is all electric and essentially a giant computer with batteries, like the performance modifications are just software. So, I mean, Elon and company had to imagine that
People were going to hack it. Yeah.
Hackers going to be hacking, right?
I guess it's
but they're cracking down on it.
I think it's a liability issue for them because, I mean, people can't quite fathom, and I can see a jury having a lot of trouble with the idea of the car is really just a computer.
Yeah.
And so
it is really just a computer.
If you get if you take your car and you go out to your truck or whatever, and you take the engine out and you do all kinds of whacked out stuff to it, most people look at that when it blows up and you die, they go, he was screwing around with it. But this gets so esoteric, and it's like really hard for people to fathom that you made these like hacks. Like I have a motorcycle, you can it's got all, you can update the software,
OBD,
change the performance with the software. And that's like a real weird thing, and I don't think a lot of people fathom exactly what's going on there. So they're probably afraid of like big lawsuits when you screw your Tesla up and brick it, and you're sitting there going, wow, my $130,000 Tesla won't start. And they're like, did you mess with it? No way, man. Is that a flash drive plugged into the engine block? No, it's not mine. It's probably Transparent Tribe.
I see another T-shirt idea. I bricked my Tesla.
I bricked my Tesla.
Now, to some of that question, I really wish Jack Daniel were here. That like, where does this fall in the automotive industry, and other industries, in the right to repair? Do we have the right to repair or modify the software to make sure that our Tesla continues to run as designed? And can we change components that may have additional added feature sets?
Yeah, so apparently, Larry,
I understand that they
if you open the hood, you voided the warranty.
Yeah, but so you save $800 and you purchase an InGenX Boost 50 module instead of Tesla's official upgrade. Tesla detects this and displays a dialog box that won't go away on your screen. Yeah, that's like you've installed an incompatible vehicle modification detected. I think the car comes out. That's like something from Star Trek. Like
it's coming at you.
Incompatible spaceship modification detected.
Or the Tesla just starts whacking you with the doors every time you walk up and goes, "You don't do that shit anymore.
Stop hacking me.
Stop
it." You bought that mod from China. Damn it.
Oh boy.
Ooh, the hood just comes down. Your hands are gone. You're not going to do that again.
It's just a matter
I can't do that, Dave. Please start the car.
For the
can't do that, Dave.
Manufacturers find a way around those checks too. So.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it's a huge debate about your right to, just like with iPhones or anything else, your right to unlock this and do whatever you want to it. So
different though when it's a car, because I can't get on my Wi-Fi modem and drive it down the street and endanger other people's lives.
And of course, the courts are going to say, if the car is hacked into some unsafe mode, it may kill other people, and your iPhone can't really do that unless it blows up or something.
Which
but your 1978 Chevy can. So how is it any different?
Well, they do. I mean, they have restrictions.
No, it's true,
they have restrictions on that. I mean, there's stuff.
I could mod my car and then my brakes don't work. Right? And so is it the manufacturer or me?
There's stuff that's not allowed. And, I mean, different municipalities have different rules about mods you can do to vehicles. Like you can't put, wheel tubs on certain cars, and you can't. I mean, people do it anyway, but.
Now, you're from the South, Doug. Is there a restriction on converting a pickup truck into a pool? By putting a tarp
Not at
in
all.
it
In fact, it's encouraged.
It's encouraged. Can you drive it around with people in it?
Oh, hell yeah. In fact, it's encouraged. You can fill it with Schlitz beer and drive it around.
There's been an entire industry built around this, though, with the diesel modifications, all the tuners for tractors and semi-trailers and trucks. And so really those were geared around the problem with warranty. And I think what we're running into now is a convergence of technology in conjunction with safety. And there's not a whole lot of precedence for how that plays in. Yeah, I think Tesla's overall concern might be safety second and maybe
profit first.
And visibility, like their overall brand awareness and safety is kind of the first go around of what they're trying to protect. I think they're really after making sure the car works right and they don't have a bunch of recalls or issues with the performance of them, right? So safety, I believe, is a part of it, but I think that's only secondary to their profits and margins.
Well, remember all the stuff they had with accidents in the self-driving mode, and they were really trying to nail
there's a hard time proving. Well, so there's two parts to that, right? There's a hard time proving whether or not that was the self-driving or if it was a person. And then the second part of that was, okay, was this made hugely public because people were trying to manipulate stock prices and play against, a new model that's coming out, or the autopilot that's getting released, or some debut technology that's coming out?
Tyler, I think avoidance of legal action drives a lot of technology decisions, right? I think YouTube is a huge example of this.
Yeah.
I was just updating some of my YouTube. I mean, my friend Bob was updating some of his YouTube scraping code and realizing that you just can't scrape the page with requests, that you have to use something like Selenium with a headless browser to load the entire DOM. And or you can use their API, in which case you're going to have a quota, right? And I think YouTube makes these decisions to make it more difficult to post content, make it more difficult to scrape content, because they're worried about a lawsuit, right? And I go back to Steve Wozniak being part of a class action lawsuit that they're suing YouTube because someone put up a YouTube video that was derogatory towards Wozniak or using his voice or some kind of deep fake or something with him in it, and they didn't take it down fast enough. So YouTube's putting up every technological barrier possible, and the only reason they're doing that is because they don't want to deal with a lawsuit. Tesla's in the same boat. Or car, I guess you could say.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Tesla needs to step up their game with the protections around that because all the other car manufacturers have been doing this for a long time. Like you're talking about an ECU and getting into them. All these chip manufacturers have to actually look for buffer collisions and code collisions in order to get into the encrypted ECU, which the vendors had to put in because of all these modifications.
I think it was Hyundai, the Korean one. Is that Hyundai?
Hyundai. Kia.
Hyundai.
Yeah.
Hyundai. The rumor was, like, on the forums, there was a former employee that, like, stole one of the ECU copying devices from the factory and, like, on the side was, like, rewriting people's ECUs. Like, you sent him your ECU, he would rewrite it for you because he stole the device from the factory that would do it, right? Like, that's what you get into, Tyler. Man. Yeah. Yep.
Always insider.
Yep. But the reason Tesla, again, going back to Tesla, the reason they don't want you hacking your stuff or making it easy for people to change or modify is they don't want to get sued. And if they get sued, they want an easy out from that lawsuit.
Every time
we put all these protections in place and they violated them.
And when you brick it, they're going to have to prove that you bricked it
and
that it wasn't some flaw that you now want repaired, because when you have it towed into the Tesla dealer saying, I don't know what's wrong with it, because that's what they'll do, is that to tow it to the Tesla dealer and go, I don't know what's wrong with it. I was, all I do is drive it to church on Sundays. I got in it yesterday and it's throwing this message up on the screen. They're going, no, that's a hack message. And I don't know. It's probably the neighbor came over and did that or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Well, by the way, part of the message is your warranty is now void.
Yeah, then there could be people hacking your car to void the warranty on it, just as a joke.
I'm with you on the excuses. I think you're spot on, but looking at the photo, I'm trying to decide if whether this is also a piece of hardware that gets inserted. So it's like, you didn't do anything, but this was plugged into the system. We removed it, and everything's fine now.
It usually has to be both on these embedded systems, almost always. I mean, unless you're finding a way to unencrypt that CAN bus traffic and actually interact with the ECU and the computer at that level, like, I don't know how you get in between that encryption unless it's, fully clear text, which is often the case on some CAN buses.
Yep, more often than not. And Tyler, you think about those CAN buses, specifically, traditional gasoline automobile. You've got the low speed and the high speed CAN bus, and your low speed is typically around your entertainment, your door locks, and your high speed is engine control. At higher speed, and the cost of the devices, arguably has gone up a little bit, so they can do some better processing. So the security may be lower there just because of the cost.
I agree.
Speaking of passing the buck, researchers are sounding the alarm over malicious AWS community AMIs. So Amazon says you should you use a shared AMI at your own risk. Amazon can't vouch for the integrity or security of AMI shared by other Amazon EC2 users. Therefore, you should treat shared AMIs as you would any foreign code that you might consider deploying in your own data center and perform the appropriate due diligence. We recommend that you get an AMI from a trusted source. It sounds like a public announcement being played in some future sci-fi movie.
Caution, filling may be hot.
Yep.
I mean,
I'm waiting for the more you know music.
Right? It was so boilerplate, right? I mean, do a lot of people like customize their own? I don't have enough AMIs where I've customized my own. I run the fairly official Debian ones.
I'm sure people do, though.
But much like containers, I would rather be in control over how those are built. now that I think about it.
But
like,
there's
I
just
would
more
want
of this,
my own AMIs.
But there's so much of that sharing. I mean, that whole hobby community idea, just like with the Teslas, is out there, and all those people are sort of shifting around into different spaces. And as you shift into that space, if it's always been a lot, I would never use a straight up kernel. I rewrite everything myself every time.
Well, yeah, you're right, Doug. There's a line.
But I mean, a lot of people think like that, and then you get more. I just need this to work. Here's a solution. Pull it in, and you go grab it, and like GitHub, and you don't even validate it. You
There's
just
a middle
something.
ground though. There's like I can create my own Linux distribution, compile everything from source, right? Or I can go get a community API that has what I need from someone else, and that could very likely be backdoored. I like somewhere in between where I'm like, I want Debian. I can easily build my own Debian AMI. I can pull it down from Debian. I can check the integrity, of that build and all of those packages, and have my own, giving me a higher probability that it's not backdoored, but also not going through all of the work and support and maintenance that I have with like building my entirely own Linux distribution.
Yep.
That's kind of where I fall with containers as well. I don't like pulling what's in Docker Hub because usually, one, it's an insecure build, and two, it includes way more stuff than I need to, and three, it can be easily backdoored. I prefer building a base image off a known trusted source and building all my stuff on. Like, I don't like to pull a Docker container of Python something because they're choosing all the stuff that comes along with that. I want to choose the base OS, Debian or Ubuntu. Then I want to install Python from known trusted sources, maybe from their apt repository, and build my application on that.
But when you're doing development and you're on a tight timeline, and
that's how it happens.
And I know, and you say, I need this, and here's somebody who did it. I'm just going to pull it in. And I'm going to use it, and then it gets embedded in there, and then 2 years later,
and then you run it through your, software composition analysis, and it goes, you have 1,834 vulnerabilities that aren't even in your code. That's just in your base image.
Paul, I actually have a bit of a counter opinion on the container thing because I do like the minimized Python distributions that Docker has in the hub.
Yeah, they're okay.
Only because I'm not getting all the extra cruft with a full operating system. I don't really need a full operating system, right?
Yeah.
I just, in many cases, need a very tight, small Python environment.
So what I do in that case, Geoff, my strategy is I do a multi-stage Docker build. So I pull down the initial build environment, I install the Python packages, I build a virtual Python environment in a specific directory. When I go to stage 2, I pull in that Python environment. So I'm only pulling in the Python libraries and code that I actually need. Nothing that I did in stage 1 in terms of the build or operating system matters.
Okay, well,
that's my approach. That. I can share with my Docker files for that.
No, that's a great
I like
idea.
that approach the best. It takes a little more work and a little more tuning. I had to actually read some articles specifically on that topic on how to, build virtual environments and get them to traverse over and the different things that Python 3 actually changed some of the virtual environment building process. So I had to modify my script, but it's all working on Python 3 now, and I love the multi-stage build for that purpose.
Very nice.
Yeah. That's really nice.
I think you were here when I was doing that.
We were talking about it before. You should put that together. That's a really nice.
I should probably make an example in open source
or something on how to
demonstrate that. Yeah, because it was a lot of work.
But at the same time, a lot of people say, "I just need this to work," and they pull stuff together, and then it works, and you just say, "Forget it, it works." I'm moving on.
Look, if you're building a local app or testing a tool and just need to get something running, that's fine.
Yeah.
When you're building a production app, right, that has to maintain a certain level of security, some of that back-end plumbing you're going to want to take a more hands-on approach with. And again, I'm not advocating for like doing it all from scratch. I mean, in certain instances where you might, right? There's a middle ground that I like to play with when we're talking about AMIs and talking about containers. It's really a middle ground.
You just need to know what's there. I mean, that's the bottom line.
I don't like to leave it to. It comes back to barbecue, right? And it's kind of funny. It's in the same thing where Aaron Franklin, who Franklin's Barbecue is like world famous barbecue, and he's like, look, when I buy ribs, a lot of times they'll come prepackaged when you get them in the store, and they'll be in a saltwater solution. And it's like, look, if I'm going to add salt to my ribs, I want to be the person to do it. It's the same thing when we're building containers and AMIs. If I'm going to add packages and define what's in there, I'm going to be the person to do it.
But to continue the analogy, you didn't grow the meat and kill it and then pull the ribs out yourself.
Right.
You sort of trusted that it probably wasn't some horrible mutant chimera made out of lizard genes. You just
totally agree.
But you didn't want it to
but
go.
I want the raw cut of ribs where I can trim it myself. I don't want the butcher doing that. I want to be able to trim it myself. I want to be able to pull the skin.
So if you trust your butcher, then you're good.
I want to be able to pull the skin on the back or not pull the skin on the back, and I want to be the person to make that
decision.
Trust
your butcher, and that's.
But I don't want to go cut it from the cow myself.
See,
very good analogy, Doug. Yes.
Yeah. Taking that further, right? A serious Docker shop is going to have their own Docker repository. They're not going to rely on the on the community repositories at all. They'll take that same approach. In other words,
right?
Of building what's important to them and trusting it if they're doing things right.
Agreed. Yeah, I have my own Docker repos.
And you can build a trusted repository of those things, too. Yep. So this is the trust relationship you have with your butcher.
Right.
I mean, if you know this works, you can start from that point every time. And if you've tested it out.
I want the rawest, nicest cut of meat. I want to put that in my own freezer. I want to dry age it myself, kind of thing, right? Again, I don't want to be the person.
I'm getting hungry.
I am too. Next week we need to have a smoker here in the studio.
I know. If the smoker gets here, we can smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and also just pull raw chunks of meat out of the smoker during the show.
What
please pull the cooked chunks of meat out of the smoker.
I was going to say,
not on camera.
Would be better.
Well, you do it your way. I'll do it my way.
I don't know how much we want to talk about Lee's story number 1, that whole Uber thing.
Oh, I do too.
Well, I want to give a plug for Security and Compliance Weekly. We're going to do a whole show on Uber because our new co-host, John Snyder, who happens to be a lawyer, he's invited one of his buddies who he advertises is one of the leading criminal defense attorneys in the country. She's coming on the show, and all we're going to do is talk about this Uber thing. Yeah, but what do you want to say about it before the lawyers jump on board?
So the reason I brought this up is it was like I saw this bit that they had one data breach in 14 and they had another breach in 16, and the CSO was contacted by the hacker, and instead of making it a reportable data breach, he basically treated it like a bug bounty, made him sign an NDA. Put it all under the rug, and that just felt really creepy to me. And boy, could that be an out for somebody. That just, like I said, it rubbed me up the where's my integrity side of that. Just it bothered me.
My question is, was it part of a legitimate
No.
It wasn't about not part of a legitimate bug bounty thing, or was it like, hey, you reported this, but you should have reported it to the bug bounty?
That's the question that I ask, because we've avoided the bug bounty official channels quite a bit with some of the stuff that we found, and for specific reasons like this, where we want to go to specific people and get a lay of the land before we bring in legal and all the the hoorah show. So I'm curious how this played out. Because I don't think if it was truly just someone reporting it and, hey, we may have taken some data just to prove that, as a good POC as part of the bounty, and, hey, maybe you should pay us for our time. All right, yeah, it's probably not the best way to do it as a CTO, but I don't know if I'd go as far as infringing upon, justice or removing evidence.
And the other two things that end up weird about this too is that on the NDA, the two hackers' names were on the NDA, yet they were paid in Bitcoin to avoid the transaction, weirded, to hide it. So
I could see tax evasion, maybe, or maybe it was just an easy way through the bug bounty program because they can pay in Bitcoin because it's anonymous. I could see justification in multiple ways, but it really comes down to intent. And when you start to play in legal, right, all of this is just what was the intent and who's going to prove what intent. I don't know if that can be done well.
Well, Jason talked about this story on the news this week, and basically what he was saying, and I kind of agree, was it sounded like one of those things where you're sitting there, you've got a problem, you've got a way to solve it with some cash, And instead of calling in the big guns, you just sort of went down that road, and it was probably not the best road to go down. But it was like, I really just don't want to have to go through this again, and I'm just going to pay these idiots off. We'll call it a bug bounty. And, I mean, I can see how you do that, and you just say, look, I mean, this is so much cheaper than going through this giant gyration that we're going to have to go through with shareholders and all this other crap. And, yeah, you made a bad decision, but, I think that was the way it read to me. It was like somebody who made a bad choice, and now, I don't know that all this prosecution, but we'll hear from the lawyers on Jeff's show, because I know I'm going to hear that.
So the one part that where I break from you on that one, Doug, is it was 57 million records of PII that were hacked.
Yeah, that's more than just a couple of records.
Well, 57 million here, 100 million there. I mean, I'm not saying he's in the right. I'm not justifying what he did. I'm just saying I see how he got there.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that. Out of? I mean, was it a legitimate sample? I mean, it could have been out of 20 quintillion. Maybe it's just
was it a sample, or was it like a count? Like, did you count the database tables and do a POC and grab some, or was it an actual legitimate count? Like, that's where the intent would come in, right? Like, exfilling versus doing a proof of concept and then doing a count. That's a good, responsible disclosure, and I think that would be the way to do it.
Yeah.
But obviously, if they had a bounty program set up, I don't know.
He's definitely in the wrong. I mean, and the law is going to say one record's the same as 57 million. I mean, if you did wrong, you did wrong. But I mean, I guess my thing was just I see how somebody gets there. He got caught and now he's in trouble and his career's over and he's screwed. But I mean, that's what happens when you do bad things, right? Sometimes not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes nobody finds out.
Eventually, someone. Well, most of the time, people get caught.
Sometimes
there is a rare occasion where people just disappear and you never find them.
Yeah,
right?
All the time. That's why we have deserts and cornfields and the swamps of Jersey and the pine barrens.
Swamps.
Yeah, and western Rhode Island and the Bay, which would be eastern Rhode Island.
Wow, that's really
just all of Rhode Island.
I did have an article about escaping a hardened Docker container. I'm pretty sure the docker.sock thing has been a thing for a while. That's really what this article was kind of preying on. I didn't read it in great detail, but I know that local Docker containers can abuse the permissions of the /var/run docker.sock file for a privilege escalation. That's been a known technique for some time. The article does go through a lot of good detail on that particular vulnerability, but that's a known privilege escalation bug in Docker. So
Paul, is docker.sock something you use when you can't penetrate a real Docker instance?
Correct, Larry. Yes, I know where you're going with that. Yep.
Wait, what?
I'll explain after the show time.
Yep.
So my question was, because I don't have the level of expertise with Docker that others do, is this at all mitigated by the stuff you've talked about in the past, Paul, of not running the container with privilege and other things, or is that not to help this attack?
That could help because when you do run a container without dropping the user privileges, you are running as root inside the container, and there are some very, very significant differences in terms of permissions. It inherits some permissions. It ties into how you're mounting the volumes inside of that container, whether you're mounting those volumes as root inside the container as a regular user. I would always, Lee, regardless of any of the different circumstances and details inside of Docker and how it interacts with your host system or vice versa, always drop your permissions down from the root level user to a normal level user permissions inside your Docker containers. That's like Docker security 101. That's going to mitigate a lot of attacks. And it's also very environment dependent as to which attacks that might mitigate, right?
Right.
The other thing is, in terms of permissions with Docker, just kind of stay on that same theme, the capabilities that are granted to your container accept the default, never run a privileged Docker container is essentially a process running as root, which means if I exploit a web application vulnerability, I'm essentially, even though I might not be root inside the container, I could have the capabilities that are granted to a root user, and that's bad too. And privileged containers basically give you all the capabilities inside of Linux, which is really bad. You can also manage that as a whitelist or blacklist to say which capabilities that container might have. For example, if a container is running as a non-root user but has the capability to inject a kernel module, I can inject a kernel module that shovels me back a root shell, and through a medium severity web application vulnerability, basically get root on your Docker container host, right? Then there's also App Armor and another Linux mechanism, which by default the Docker process will implement and users can manipulate. So there's 3 different, other than user level permissions and PAM, basically, there's capabilities, App Armor, and I think SE Linux Profile is the other one that you can manipulate and assign to Docker containers, all which we really need to do a webcast on how all that's put together. I think PHAS, you guys did a webcast on Docker fairly recently. I'm not sure what aspect you covered.
I don't know, actually, but I think a webcast on Docker and first of all, just on the technology itself, people are not very familiar. But then a follow-up webcast on, here are the security concerns, here's what the community's doing about it. You could do a whole series on container technology in the security industry, and we should definitely do it.
Yeah. I find that Docker containers on Linux are very loosey-goosey with security. And recently, I talked to some awesome people, and I hope you'll see them on the show here shortly. Rather than implementing Docker, they're doing it with FreeBSD and FreeBSD jails and accomplishing the same things that Docker containers give you, but in FreeBSD. And I'm a lot more confident in the security model because I've seen a lot of the attacks against Docker containers, and just how it's instrumented in Linux is, again, it can be very loosey-goosey, right? I think that's pretty cool.
I'm of 2 minds. I love Docker because it gives us as security professionals the opportunity to create micro architectures with very, very firm boundaries.
Agreed.
And if you really are thinking in terms of application architecture with a security mindset, first and foremost, you can do some great things.
Agreed.
You really can do some great things. Unfortunately, like so much of the things in our industry, that's not what people normally lead with, and the ease of deploying Docker very, very quickly gives rise to the same sets of security concerns that we've seen traditionally in the dev cycle, right?
Agreed. Yeah, if you get shell in one of my Docker containers, you got to write Python to do what you need to do, which is a totally valid attack vector, which is why you need runtime enforcement and runtime monitoring, because no matter how much you strip out of your Docker containers, if your Docker container is running a Node.js application or a Python application, whatever the application is, you can't wget things. You get none of your operating system. You can't even do a PS on my production level Docker containers. If you're going to do anything, you got to literally live off the land and realize that there's a language like Python or JavaScript or some other Go language in the background, and write code in that. And that's the only way you're going to get code execution, which is not off the table, which is why you still need to monitor in real time what's happening in your container.
But that same problem we were talking about earlier, a lot of developers are not wanting to be security engineers. They just want a solution.
Yeah.
And they say, wow, this is a cool thing. I just saw, I'm going to pull it in. I'm going to pull something down off Docker Hub or whatever.
Yep.
And they do it, and they start working with it. And then way later, somebody says, look at all these holes you've got.
Yep. So, or you're pulling in Python libraries or Node.js libraries, and those libraries are backdoored, and that's another beautiful attack vector.
Yep.
Any other stories you guys want to talk about? We went kind of long on this segment, but
I think we could probably wrap. I
have to tell you, there are some fantastic segments coming up. Ferrum Avatuna, Paul Bautista, and Roy and Shani from Vicarious. You've got an all-star lineup coming up next. It is pre-recorded content, but I tell you what, I was on every single one of those segments, and I would go back and re-listen to them myself because they're just they're jam-packed full of great information. Yeah. So make sure you stay tuned. Good stuff coming up next.
Hey, that was fun.
Yeah.
Yay.